Arrest! Arrest him! It was him. He snuck into my garage and cut my brake line. He tried to kill me to steal my property. Shoot him! Don't let the murderer escape!" The blatant, bone-chilling slander left Leo stunned, frozen in place. The sky over Newport, Rhode Island today seemed to be drenched in mourning as relentless rain poured down without pause, enveloping the secluded mansions of the ultra-wealthy in a veil of gray, cold mist. The funeral of Mr. Duke, the legendary steel billionaire, was held in an atmosphere so solemn it felt suffocating. Long lines of glossy black Cadillacs and Rolls-Royce Phantoms moved slowly along the cobblestone road, forming a scene that was both lavish and deeply somber. At the center of the ceremony, standing right before the freshly filled grave, Rex, the 30-year-old adopted son and current CEO of the conglomerate, bowed his head with a face heavy with sorrow. Rainwater mingled with fake tears streaming down his cheeks, making anyone who looked at him feel a pang of sympathy for the apparent devotion of the heir. Yet no one knew that beneath that shell of grief lay a cruel and calculating heart. While his eyes remained sorrowful as they gazed at the gravestone, Rex's hand was secretly at work inside the pocket of his raincoat. His fingers darted rapidly across his phone's keyboard, sending urgent messages to his trusted stockbroker. He ordered the immediate dumping of all shares before news of his father's death spread to the market and caused the asset values to collapse. Amid the rolling thunder that drowned out the prayers, a dark and arrogant thought flashed through Rex's mind. Finally, the old man is dead. After all these years of waiting, this massive empire is completely mine. In stark contrast to the luxury and hypocrisy of Newport, thousands of miles away, the industrial city of Detroit appeared worn down and impoverished, a bleak landscape of the working class. Inside an overcrowded public hospital reeking of disinfectant, Leo sat motionless on a hard plastic chair in the hallway. The former Marine, with hands rough and calloused from years of engine oil and auto repair work, now looked painfully small before the weight of fate. His sleep-deprived, sunken eyes were fixed through the glass of the emergency room, where his young daughter Emily lay barely breathing, her chest rising and falling with difficulty beneath an oversized oxygen mask due to a vicious case of pneumonia. In Leo's hand was the hospital bill, the glaring red numbers burning into his eyes, along with a debt totaling $50,000 crushing down on his narrow shoulders, making him feel as though he could barely breathe. Just as despair reached its absolute peak, the worn-out ringtone of an old phone in his pocket rang out, shattering the deathly silence. On the other end of the line was Attorney Smith, a man with a cold yet resolute voice. He informed Leo that his name appeared in the will of a recently deceased anonymous client and that a first-class plane ticket had already been sent to his email. Though filled with doubt and having no idea who the deceased person was, when Leo turned his head and looked back at his tiny daughter fighting desperately for every breath, he had no other choice. He cast aside his pride and accepted this fateful journey, not out of greed for a changed life, but for one single reason only. He needed money, immediately, to save his daughter's life. The next morning, Leo arrived in Newport after a long and exhausting flight. Standing before the main gate of the Duke estate, he felt like a strange creature who had mistakenly stepped into the world of gods. The towering black wrought iron gates, intricately carved and imposing, blocked the entrance, while behind them stretched an ancient stone castle as far as the eye could see. Leo's appearance stood in complete contrast and felt utterly out of place amid such overwhelming luxury. He wore only a thin, cheap windbreaker hastily bought at Walmart, frayed at the cuffs, and carried a single worn-out backpack on his shoulder containing a few faded changes of clothes. Immediately, two large security guards with walkie-talkies on their shoulders stepped forward to block his path, their eyes scanning Leo with suspicion and contempt, firmly refusing to let him cross the painted boundary line, despite his attempts to explain his appointment. Just as the tension was escalating, the sharp roar of a V12 engine tore through the silence. A blazing red Ferrari, gleaming as if it had been dipped in blood and fire, shot forward and screeched to a stop right in front of the gate. The car window slowly rolled down, revealing the handsome yet unmistakably arrogant face of Rex. He removed his expensive sunglasses and squinted as he looked Leo up and down with undisguised disgust. Noticing the man's shabby appearance, Rex curled his lips into a mocking sneer and spat out a venomous insult. "Hey, buddy, you're in the wrong place. There's no scrap metal or trash here for you to pick through. Get lost before I call the cops to haul you away for ruining the scenery." With that, Rex jerked his chin, ordering the guards to throw this lowly poor man out immediately so he could drive in. The bodyguards obeyed, lunging forward aggressively, preparing to use force to shove Leo aside. Leo's hand tightened around the strap of his backpack, veins bulging, as his soldier's instinct urged him to fight back, but thoughts of his daughter waiting for hospital money held him in place. Fortunately, at that very moment, the heavy iron gates shuddered and slowly opened. Attorney Smith appeared in a perfectly tailored suit, his stern and authoritative voice ringing out as he stopped the guards. He strode forward, pushed the aggressive men aside, and respectfully invited Leo inside amid Rex's utter shock and his glare filled with seething resentment. Stepping through the grand doors, the sense of overwhelm pressed even harder on Leo's mind as he entered the main living hall of the mansion. The space was vast and magnificent, like a royal palace hall, with towering ceilings painted with classical murals, dazzling crystal chandeliers, and exquisite sculptures that reeked of money and absolute power. Leo perched timidly on the edge of a deep red velvet sofa, feeling as though the dust and grease stains on his clothes were polluting the elegance of the room. Across from him, Rex reclined comfortably in his chair, gently swirling a glass of expensive whiskey, his eyes fixed on Leo with open disdain, as if studying a strange creature. Growing impatient, he tapped his fingers against the armrest and urged Attorney Smith to hurry up and end this charity performance so he could kick this beggar out of the house. However, the atmosphere in the room suddenly grew thick and tense when Attorney Smith did not rush to read the will. Instead, he placed a thick file stamped with a glaring red "Top Secret" label onto the cold marble table. In a low but steady voice, he began recounting a tragedy Rex had never fully known. It was the story from 28 years ago when Mr. Duke's only biological son was mysteriously kidnapped. The police and the FBI had turned the country upside down in search of the child, but in vain, and the case gradually reached a dead end, while the pain of losing his son turned the steel tycoon into a lonely, withdrawn man for the rest of his life. Rex frowned, clearly bored and irritated at having to listen again to what he considered outdated and meaningless history. Yet the true drama exploded when Attorney Smith turned to the final page of the file. He revealed that in the final days of his life, Mr. Duke had secretly hired a top-tier private investigation team to re-examine the entire national DNA database, cross-referencing it with military records as well. And a miracle truly happened. A genetic match with a 99.9% probability was found. Attorney Smith slowly lifted his head, his gaze firm and emotional as it locked onto the stunned auto mechanic. He declared solemnly,
You are not a random guest, Leo. You are Mr. Duke's biological son who was lost all those years ago. Time seemed to freeze at that exact moment. A sharp crashing sound ripped through the silence as the crystal glass slipped from the trembling fingers of Rex, hit the floor and shattered into pieces, whiskey splashing everywhere like fragments of a broken truth. Rex's once arrogant face turned deathly pale, drained of all color, his eyes wide open as he stared at Leo as if seeing a ghost.
Meanwhile, Leo was completely frozen, his entire body numb with shock. He stared blankly at the DNA test results, unable to believe that the father he had never known, the man he thought had abandoned him at an orphanage long ago, was in fact the powerful billionaire and owner of this very mansion. The atmosphere inside the gold-adorned living room was now so tense that one could hear Rex's ragged breathing and the erratic pounding of his heart driven by fear. He stood frozen in place, cold sweat beading across his forehead, fully convinced that the appearance of the biological son along with the DNA test results was a death sentence for his ambitions. In Rex's mind flashed the image of himself being thrown out onto the streets with empty hands, losing all the power and wealth he had always craved. Yet Attorney Smith maintained a calmness that bordered on icy indifference. He signaled for everyone to be quiet, then slowly broke the seal of the official will and began reading aloud the words that would determine the fate of the two young men. The first and greatest shock was reserved for Rex. Completely contrary to his overwhelming fear, the lawyer's voice rang out firmly. To Rex, my adopted son, I leave to you full executive control of the Duke Group, all real estate holdings in Newport and New York City, and a net fortune valued at $5 billion. Rex seemed unable to believe his own ears, his mouth falling open, his eyes widening in disbelief. The lawyer continued, reading the clearly stated reasoning in the will. As for Leo, my lost son, I leave you a keepsake, a broken old pocket watch, along with a check in the amount of $5,000. He pulled from his briefcase a chain pocket watch with a tarnished exterior, its hands frozen in place, and set it on the table beside the thin check. The horrifying contrast between $5 billion and $5,000, between a mighty empire and a broken piece of scrap, was the final act of cruelty the billionaire father inflicted upon the biological son he had only just found. The moment Attorney Smith's voice fell silent, a burst of manic laughter suddenly exploded, shattering the heavy atmosphere of the luxurious living room. Rex threw his head back and laughed wildly, the laughter of a man who had narrowly escaped death, filled with overwhelming relief and triumph. He looked at Leo with eyes full of pity mixed with contempt, as if staring at a pitiful animal that had just been abandoned by its owner. The fear of losing everything that had gripped him moments earlier vanished completely, replaced by an arrogance more intense than ever now that he knew he had won this game. Rex casually pulled his personal checkbook from his inner pocket, took out a gold-plated fountain pen, and scribbled down a number. Rip! The sharp sound of tearing paper rang out. Rex crumpled the freshly written check into a ball and tossed it onto the marble floor, right at the feet of Leo's old, dust-covered shoes. Curling his lips, he hurled a venomous insult in the tone of a superior. I'm more generous than that senile old man ever was. Here, take another $10,000. Consider it compensation for your emotional trauma after being abandoned all these decades. Add it to the spare change in the will, and you've got a full $15,000. That's more than enough for a ragged loser like you to change your life and crawl back to that filthy Detroit slum you came from. Don't ever let me see your face here again. Leo remained seated, silent to the stone statue, his resolute face showing no reaction to the insults. He slowly bent down.
Rex smirked, expecting to see Leo pick up the money like a starving beggar. But no, Leo's calloused, scar-covered hand brushed past the valuable check as if it were trash. He gently picked up the old, broken pocket watch, used his thumb to wipe away the layer of dust from its cracked glass, his eyes glowing with an unusual sense of reverence. Then he suddenly stood up, picked up Rex's $10,000 check, and tore it into countless white fragments that fluttered down right in front of Rex's face. Leo stared straight into Rex's eyes, his voice low but resonant with authority. "I didn't come here to beg for your charity. The only thing I regret is that I didn't get the chance to meet him and call him father while he was still alive." With that, he clenched the pocket watch in his hand like a priceless treasure, turned his back, and walked straight out the door, leaving Rex rooted in place, with the smile frozen and extinguished on his lips by the unimaginable dignity of the man he had deemed worthless.
As Leo's unyielding back disappeared behind the heavy oak doors, the gold-clad living room sank into a terrifying silence. The arrogant smile on Rex's lips was snuffed out like a candle in the wind, replaced by flickering eyes filled with calculation and unease. Although the will had confirmed him as the sole heir to the billion-dollar empire, deep within the suspicious mind of a ruthless businessman, Rex knew this victory was not truly complete. He understood all too well that American law always leaves loopholes and certain privileges for direct bloodlines. Leo's existence, a flesh and blood biological son with irrefutable DNA evidence, was a ticking bomb threatening his absolute position. Rex began pacing back and forth, the sound of leather shoes striking sharply against the cold marble floor. Dark thoughts churned in his mind. What if he changes his mind tomorrow? What if some lawyer convinces him to sue for his legitimate portion? All it would take was a single inheritance dispute lawsuit for the company's stock to plunge, assets to be frozen by the court, and his chairman's seat to shake violently. The fear of having to share even a single cent with someone he considered trash caused Rex's greed and cruelty to surge stronger than ever. No, he could not accept that risk. He needed a solution more thorough, more ruthless, and more final than merely driving Leo away. Rex stopped in his tracks, his eyes flashing with the cold gleam of a predatory beast. He realized that the only way for Leo to permanently lose the right to contest anything, to forever be unable to return and claim his share, was to destroy his reputation. Rex wanted to turn Leo into a filthy criminal, a convicted felon stripped of civil rights, so that his words would be worthless in any court of law. Rex glanced toward his trusted head bodyguard, standing with arms crossed in the shadows, the man who had long handled his dirty problems. With nothing more than a meaningful glance and a slight jerk of his chin toward the exit, the cruel order was given without a single word spoken. The bodyguard nodded faintly in understanding, quietly slipped away from the group, and began tailing Leo, carrying out a filthy script already approved by his master. Unaware of the despicable plot closing in behind him, Leo walked slowly into the mansion's main hall, his heart weighed down by heavy thoughts. Though he had just been stripped of a colossal inheritance, when his hand touched the old pocket watch in his coat pocket, he felt a strange sense of peace for having preserved his dignity in the face of money's temptation. Leo stopped at the main door, adjusted the worn strap of his backpack, and took a deep breath, preparing to return to the harsh reality where his daughter was waiting. At that moment, Rex's trusted bodyguard glided past him like a ghost. He pretended to stumble lightly into Leo while reaching for the heavy oak door, muttering a careless apology.
But in that fleeting instant of contact, the skilled hand of a professional swiftly dropped a small, cold object into the side mesh pocket of Leo's backpack. It was the blue diamond ring, a rare family heirloom with a mesmerizing deep blue stone, valued at up to $500,000. Rex's perfect script was activated the moment the bodyguard stepped away. From the top of the marble staircase, Rex's shrill scream ripped through the quiet space, making everyone jump. "Stop! Everyone freeze! It's gone! Where is my blue diamond ring?" Rex stormed down into the hall like a whirlwind, his face flushed red, masterfully acting the role of a man in absolute panic. He pointed a trembling finger straight at Leo, who stood at the doorway utterly confused, then roared an order at the security team. "Lock the main gate immediately! Don't let that ragged bastard take one more step out of here! I knew it! People from filthy slums always have theft in their blood." The alarm siren blared piercingly as the massive iron gate slowly slammed shut with a bone-chilling crash, cutting off Leo's only escape. The large, vicious-looking guards rushed forward at once, surrounding the former Marine like a pack of hunting wolves. Leo stood frozen in the center of the circle, his expression shifting from shock to fury as he realized he had fallen into a despicable trap with no way out, laid by the very man who was his brother in name only. Only minutes after the alarm siren sounded, the heart-piercing wail of police sirens thundered along the road leading to the mansion, tearing through the gray curtain of rain. The police chief, a heavy-set middle-aged man with a flushed red face, a weekend golf buddy of Rex, stepped out of the car with an air of imposing authority. Without asking what had happened or taking any objective statements, he immediately signaled his subordinates to rush in and subdue Leo as if he were a pre-identified high-risk criminal. Despite Leo's attempts to explain in the calm, steady voice of a soldier, the officers roughly yanked the old backpack from his shoulder and dumped it upside down onto the rain-soaked hood of the patrol car. Cheap personal belongings spilled everywhere, a few worn clothes, an old water bottle, and then, clink! A sharp metallic sound rang out as the blue diamond ring rolled free, gleaming with bitter irony amid the pile of poverty-stricken items. With the evidence laid bare before his eyes, the police chief curled his lips into a sneer and shook his head at Leo with contempt, as if the outcome had been obvious all along. Without hesitation, he violently slammed Leo's face down onto the icy hood of the car and wrenched his arms behind his back. The chilling clank of metal echoed as the handcuffs snapped tight around the former Marine's wrists. Leo clenched his teeth, veins bulging in fury and injustice, his cheek pressed hard against the cold metal, his eyes staring helplessly into empty space. He knew he had been perfectly framed, but at this moment, all explanations were meaningless in the face of money's power and fabricated evidence. The peak of cruelty came when Rex strolled over leisurely. Instead of showing distress over the loss of his property, he pulled out the latest smartphone, activated livestream mode, and shoved the camera right up to Leo's humiliated, crushed face. Thousands of viewers began flooding in online. Rex laughed mockingly, his fake voice ringing across social media. "Everyone, take a good look. This is the real face of the long-lost brother I just found. He barely stepped into my house and already revealed himself as an ungrateful thief. Some people never change." A flood of vicious comments filled the screen, shredding Leo's dignity. In the pouring rain, Leo was dragged away like a condemned man, carrying an injustice that pierced the heavens, unable to speak, while Rex watched with glee, convinced he had crushed his enemy to the very bottom of society. Watching the police car carrying Leo disappear into the blinding white rain along with the fading sirens, Rex could not hide the triumphant smile spreading across his lips.
His chest swelled with a manic exhilaration, like an emperor who had just eliminated the final seed of rebellion to monopolize the throne. Drunk on this absolute victory, Rex did not want to remain inside the gloomy, funeral-scented mansion for even another second. He whistled loudly and jumped into his brand-new bright red Ferrari, the symbol of power and wealth he had now officially seized. His destination was the most luxurious nightclub in the city, where expensive champagne and hot models were already waiting to celebrate the new chairman of the Duke Group. Ignoring the storm howling madly outside, Rex slammed the car door shut and floored the accelerator. The V12 engine roared like a beast unleashed, tearing apart the quiet night of Newport. Inside the leather-wrapped cockpit, deafening club music blasted at maximum volume, drowning out even the thunder. One hand loosely held the steering wheel while the other tilted back a bottle of expensive liquor he had grabbed from the mansion's bar. The burning alcohol rushed to his head, mixing with the intoxication of power, stripping Rex of all reason and basic caution. He drove wildly faster, the speedometer needle shooting up to a terrifying number, 120 miles per hour, despite the winding coastal roads slick with rain like it had been coated in oil. "The whole world belongs to me!" Rex screamed drunkenly, eyes blazing with arrogance. But cruel fate and instant karma always strike at the moment of greatest hubris. As the supercar rocketed toward the deadly hairpin turn along the cliff, Rex suddenly realized the water-slick road had lost all traction. He panicked and slammed the brakes, but it was already too late. Driven by massive inertia, the Ferrari slid like a marble across glass, completely out of control. In a horrifying instant, the car spun, smashed through the fragile guardrail with a thunderous crash. The expensive mass of metal shot off the road and plunged freely into the pitch-black abyss below. After brutal impacts against jagged rock walls, the car flipped belly up near the edge of the sea, utterly destroyed and beginning to spew thick smoke, turning Rex's glorious coronation day into a blood-soaked tragedy in the blink of an eye. The convoy of police cars, sirens screaming through the stormy night to escort the criminal Leo to the station, suddenly screeched to a halt at the coastal bend. Headlights cut through the rain, illuminating the sheer cliff below, where Rex's Ferrari lay upside down, crushed like a heap of scrap metal. Gasoline poured violently from beneath the wreck, mixing with rainwater, black smoke billowing upward, sparks crackling ominously, signaling an imminent disaster. The officers scrambled out of their vehicles, but when they saw the danger below, all of them hesitated. The police chief, his face drained of color, shouted to stop his men. "Don't go down there! Gas is everywhere! It's about to explode! Call the fire department now!" In their eyes, their own lives mattered more than risking everything to save a dying man in the ravine. But Leo was different. Sitting inside the police car, his eyes ignited with the fire of a U.S. Marine who had faced death countless times. He did not see the man who had framed him. He only saw a human being trapped in a fiery death trap. Leo roared, his voice overpowering even the thunder. "Let me out! Get these damn cuffs off me now! He'll burn to death before the firefighters get here." The intensity and commanding gaze of Leo made the officer holding the key tremble and obey instinctively. The moment the sharp click sounded, Leo kicked the car door open and hurled himself down the jagged cliff without a second's hesitation. Ignoring the sharp rocks tearing his skin and drawing blood, ignoring the slippery mud that sent him stumbling again and again, Leo slid downward at a breakneck pace.
He reached the mangled car as the stench of gasoline became suffocating. Inside, Rex was unconscious, his face smeared with blood. The doors were jammed tight. With no tools, Leo smashed the remaining glass using his bare hands and hardened elbows. Shards of razor-sharp glass pierced his hands, pain searing through him, but Leo clenched his teeth, endured it, reached in, grabbed Rex by the collar, and used every ounce of strength to drag the large man from the twisted wreckage. He hoisted Rex onto his shoulder and staggered away from the danger zone. After barely 10 meters, a horrifying boom erupted. A massive fireball exploded, lighting up the sky, the shockwave hurling both men violently to the ground. Leo used his broad back to shield Rex from the scorching debris raining down, completing an extraordinary rescue at the very gates of death.
Chaos erupted as the piercing sirens of ambulances and fire trucks arrived, ripping through the quiet coastal night. Flashing red and blue lights swept across the scene, blending with the dying flames of the exploded supercar, creating a surreal half-light nightmare. Leo lay sprawled on the soaked grass, his chest heaving violently from exhaustion after the life-and-death rescue. Blood from deep glass cuts on his hands and back seeped out, mixing with the freezing rain, yet he still struggled to rise to check on his adoptive brother. Leo naively believed that facing death together might awaken the last shred of conscience in Rex, that the boundary between life and death could erase all hatred. Rex began to stir, coughing violently from smoke inhalation, his blood and mud-covered face slowly opening his eyes. He saw his beloved car burn to nothing, then looked at Leo, the man who had just saved him from hellfire. But instead of remorse or gratitude, Rex's pupils contracted, flashing with the venomous, calculating glare of a cornered viper. He realized this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to erase Leo permanently in a legal way. He waved weakly at the police chief rushing over, then used his last remaining strength to point a trembling finger at his own savior and hiss with hatred. "Arrest! Arrest him! It was him. He snuck into my garage and cut my brake line. He tried to kill me to steal my property. Shoot him! Don't let the murderer escape." The blatant, bone-chilling slander left Leo stunned, frozen in place. He could not believe his ears, could not believe that human cruelty could sink to such a terrifying depth. But the police chief, already blinded by the Duke family's money and power, did not spare a second to judge right from wrong. He immediately drew his gun, the click of the slide echoing sharply, and aimed the cold black barrel straight at Leo's forehead. Other officers followed suit, weapons drawn, forming a ring of death. Leo, the hero who had just saved his enemy's life, now knelt in the rain, facing the guns of the law, condemned by the accusation of the very man he had pulled back from the grasp of death. In the life-and-death moment, when the police chief's finger had just begun to tighten lightly on the cold trigger, a sharp voice amplified through a loudspeaker suddenly rang out, tearing through the rain and drowning out all the chaotic noise at the scene. "Stop! Everyone lower your weapons. This is an order from the executor of the will." From the black limousine that had silently pulled up behind the ambulances, Attorney Smith stepped down with an authority never seen before. He showed no fear toward the gun barrels aimed around him, striding decisively through the police cordon, walking straight toward Leo, who was kneeling in the mud. To everyone's astonishment, the elderly lawyer bent down, not to help Leo up, but gently removed the old pocket watch from Leo's hand. Mr. Smith raised the watch high under the police headlights, then performed a strange action, forcefully twisting the crown 3 full turns to the left. Instantly, the watch face popped open, a blue light swept across the space, and a familiar voice rang out clearly from a micro-recording device embedded inside, saying,
I'm way more generous than that senile old man. Take $10,000 and get lost. I knew this poor bastard had a thief's blood in him." It was Rex's scornful voice from the living room, along with the false accusations when the ring went missing. Rex lay on the stretcher, his face drained of all color, eyes wide in terror as he realized the earth-shattering secret. Attorney Smith stared straight into Rex's eyes and declared the verdict for the traitor in a firm voice. "Do you really think Mr. Duke, an old fox of the business world, would be naive enough to hand over his entire life's empire without any safeguards? You are mistaken. Today's meeting and the first will were merely a test performance. This watch is a high-level surveillance device transmitting signals directly to my server. Every one of your actions, from your ingratitude, your insults, your scheme to plant the ring into Leo's backpack recorded by hidden security cameras, to your cruel lies just moments ago when you framed the man who saved your life, has all been captured as evidence." He flipped open the file, his voice turning as cold as a judge's sentence. "According to the supreme moral clause stipulated in the real will, if the primary heir harms a sibling or commits serious ethical violations, inheritance will be revoked immediately and unconditionally. Rex, at this very moment, you have lost everything. The entire $5 billion fortune will be transferred to someone more worthy in character. It was your own cruelty that permanently stripped you of your inheritance." The wail of police sirens seemed drowned out by Rex's hysterical screaming on the ambulance stretcher. Unable to accept the reality that he had just lost $5 billion in an instant, he thrashed violently, ignoring the blood seeping from his wounds. He glared at Attorney Smith and shouted back with the final argument of a cornered man. "You can't do this to me. No matter what, I'm still the legally adopted son on paper. I gave my entire youth to that damn corporation. And him, that ragged bastard, is just a street orphan picked up off the road. He doesn't deserve the Duke name." In response to the outburst, Attorney Smith merely sighed, his eyes looking at both young men with a mix of pity and gravity. He turned to the final page of the file, the page Mr. Duke had instructed to be opened only after the curtain fell. "You both misunderstood everything." His voice lowered, echoing like a verdict of fate. "The truth is, Mr. Duke was born infertile. He never had a biological child. The DNA test earlier was fake, bait to test human hearts." Leo froze, feeling as if the ground beneath him collapsed once again. The lawyer turned to him, his gaze softening. "Leo, you are actually the only son of Mr. Duke's most loyal driver. 28 years ago, your father took a bullet and sacrificed his life to save Mr. Duke during an assassination attempt. To repay that blood debt, Mr. Duke secretly protected you from afar, but deliberately let you grow up in poverty, struggling on your own. He wanted the fire of poverty to forge you into a man of iron will and a kind heart, untouched by the corruption of money." Then he turned to Rex, his eyes hardening with disappointment. "And you, Rex, you are the only one here who truly carries Duke blood. You are the biological son of Mr. Duke's younger brother, the drug-addicted, imprisoned brother who was disowned years ago. Mr. Duke adopted you, raised you in luxury, and gave you the best education, hoping a good environment would cleanse the tainted blood of your real father. Sadly, he was wrong. You grew up to become his perfect replica, cruel, greedy, and ungrateful." A painful paradox was exposed under the headlights. The one believed to be an outsider was chosen for his noble character, while the blood relative was discarded for his rotten nature. Attorney Smith's final words were driven like nails into everyone's mind. "Blood does not make a family. How you live decides who you are."
The fateful rain that night finally stopped, washing away filthy schemes and leaving behind a clear sky the next morning, marking the restoration of order at the Duke estate. Rex was handcuffed directly on the ambulance stretcher, screaming in despair as police escorted him away. Facing multiple serious charges from false accusation and bribery of officials to intentional bodily harm, the future awaiting the greedy man was not a powerful chairman's seat, but a long sentence behind federal prison bars and a crippled body, a costly yet fitting price for his twisted character. Meanwhile, Leo accepted his new destiny not with fear, but with the resolve of a soldier forged by hardship. He decided to bring his daughter Emily and his family to live in the ancient castle. Emily's presence, now fully healthy thanks to the best medical care, along with the clear laughter of a child, breathed warm life into the estate, dispelling the cold loneliness that had blanketed it for decades. Leo understood that the legacy Mr. Duke left behind was not just money, but responsibility. He studied management tirelessly, rapidly filling his knowledge gaps to prove himself worthy of steering Duke Industries. With the massive $5 billion fortune, Leo made a bold move that earned respect across both business and society. He allocated $3 billion to establish a charity fund named Second Chance, dedicated to funding surgeries for poor children and vocational training for the homeless, people struggling at society's bottom just as he once had. The remaining $2 billion were fully reinvested into the corporation to restructure operations and expand markets, leading Duke Industries to flourish stronger than even its golden era. In the final scene, Leo stood solemnly before two adjacent graves, that of billionaire Mr. Duke and that of his biological father, the loyal driver. Wearing the elegant suit of a chairman, he bowed deeply in tribute, then gently took the pocket watch from his breast pocket. Once deemed scrap, the watch was now perfectly restored, gleaming under the sunlight. The steady ticking of the second hand echoed strong and constant, symbolizing the dawn of a new era, an era where compassion and kindness are the greatest forces in building true success.